The toast had already started when I realized I was about to become the punchline. String lights flickered above the backyard. Laughter floated across the lawn. My father stood at the head of the long folding table, one hand wrapped around a sweating glass of bourbon, the other resting proudly on Megan's shoulder. "And this," he said, smiling like a man who had never been questioned in his life, "is the mistake from my first marriage." The laugh came in waves. Soft at first, then louder. Like everyone needed permission and he had just granted it. My face didn't move, but something inside me did. Because in my coat pocket my phone pressed against my palm. And I had been carrying the proof for 6 months. Rewind. 2 hours earlier the reunion looked harmless. Backyard trimmed to perfection. White tablecloths. Mason jars. The smell of grilled steak and nostalgia. Vanessa floated between guests like she owned the air itself. Polished smile, effortless charm. She kissed cheeks, adjusted Megan's hair, laughed at all the right moments. Megan stood beside her, glowing in that quiet, obedient way that made adults nod approvingly. And my father, he performed. That's the only word for it. Richard, charming patriarch. Handshakes firm. Voice booming. Stories polished. Every anecdote carefully edited for maximum admiration. He clapped cousins on the back. He told neighbors how proud he was of his girl. He never looked at me for more than 2 seconds at a time. Public image is a stage. Private history is the rehearsal no one sees. When I was 7, my bedroom disappeared. That's how I remember the divorce. Not the shouting. Not the paperwork. Just coming back one weekend to find Megan sleeping in my bed. Vanessa said it made more sense that way. Dad said I wouldn't be staying as much anyway. Visits became every other weekend. Then once a month. Then birthdays. Then Christmas cards with 4 signatures. Richard, Vanessa, Megan. And a dog I'd never met. At my high school graduation he arrived late. Left before cake. To college he mailed a check with no note. I kept trying. Sent photos. Invitations. Updates. I thought if I achieved enough, smiled enough, forgave enough, I would earn something. Not money. Not praise. Just belonging. But Megan was the clean slate. The do-over. The daughter from the marriage that worked. And slowly the language shifted. She's my only daughter. Megan's my pride. And me? Oh, she's from before. Like I was a subscription trial he forgot to cancel. The first message came during an overnight ER shift. Wrong number. That's what I thought. A photo. Vanessa. At a hotel bar. Her hand resting on a man's thigh. The caption read, "Tuesday again? He has no idea." I stared at it for a full minute before responding. Wrong number. 3 dots appeared. Then, oh, delete that. But she didn't block me. Instead, more messages came over the next weeks. Receipts. Voice notes. Inside jokes. I never replied again. I just saved them. Screenshots. Dates. Times. I created a folder. Named it insurance. One night a message made my stomach drop. She doesn't know. Or thinks she's mine. That's all that matters. She. Megan. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't expose anything. Because Megan was innocent. And revenge that burns too wide isn't justice. It's collateral damage. So I waited. And I watched. And I carried it. Now back to the toast. And this, Richard repeated, raising his glass toward me, is the mistake from my first marriage. The word hung there. Mistake. Not daughter. Not Emily. Mistake. Megan laughed nervously, unsure. Vanessa smiled too quickly. Relatives avoided eye contact. My hand tightened around my phone inside my pocket. 6 months of restraint. 6 months of choosing silence. I felt the familiar pull. Stay small. Don't ruin the night. Don't be difficult. That's what I'd always done. Protected his image. Absorbed the humiliation. Accepted the rewrite. But something shifted when the laughter didn't stop. When he leaned into it. When he said, "We all make mistakes the first time, right?" More laughter. That's when I understood. He had made it a performance. And if it was going to be a performance, it deserved an audience. I slid my phone halfway out of my pocket. The screen lit up against my palm. I had 2 choices. Stay quiet. Or end the performance. The first message was an accident. The rest weren't. After that night in the ER when Vanessa texted me by mistake, I expected panic. A block. An apology. Instead, I got silence. Then 2 days later, another message. Not to me, but to him. And somehow still to my phone. A forwarded hotel confirmation. Same place as usual. Tuesday. He thinks I'm at Pilates. I didn't breathe for a full 5 seconds. Then I screenshot it. Not out of vengeance. Out of instinct. Because when you grow up being rewritten, you learn to document reality. The messages escalated over weeks. Voice notes. Photos from a car I didn't recognize. A close-up of a man's wristwatch resting against Vanessa's thigh. R is so predictable, she typed once. Same speeches. Same routines. Same ego. I stared at that word. Ego. That's what this was about. Not love. Not loneliness. Vanessa wasn't trapped. She wasn't miserable. She was calculating. Careful. Strategic. Tuesdays were their pattern. Richard had golf league every Tuesday night. Of course he did. I started checking timestamps. Cross-referencing old family calendars I still had saved in cloud backups. Golf. Business dinners. Church board meetings. Every Tuesday. Like clockwork. The affair wasn't spontaneous. It was scheduled. Organized. Maintained. That's when the message arrived that changed everything. She doesn't know. Or thinks she's mine. That's all that matters. I read it 3 times. She, Megan, R, Richard, thinks she's mine. The room felt smaller. Because suddenly this wasn't just betrayal. It was architecture. Richard had built his identity on certainty. My perfect family. My legacy. My only daughter. He said it constantly. At barbecues. At church. At work events. He wore fatherhood like a badge of moral superiority. And if that message was true, then everything he used to diminish me rested on false ground. I zoomed in on the timestamp. 6 years ago. Not recent. Not reckless. Long term. That meant Megan was already alive. Already old enough to be in school. And Vanessa still wrote it casually. Like a detail. Like a footnote. Or thinks she's mine. That's all that matters. I locked my phone and sat in the dark of my apartment for a long time. Because this wasn't simple revenge. Megan was innocent. She didn't choose any of this. She didn't ask to be the replacement. And exposing it wouldn't just hurt Richard. It would fracture her entire identity. So I did nothing. For months. I worked my shifts. I attended birthdays. I smiled when he introduced me as from before. I let him rewrite the narrative again and again. But I kept gathering. Hotel receipts matched credit card charges Vanessa once joked about. A selfie from a lakeside cabin dated 2 weeks before Megan's 9th birthday. A voice note where she laughed and said, "If he ever knew." The overlap became undeniable. The affair didn't start recently. It started before the divorce. Before my bedroom disappeared. Before visits became occasional. Vanessa hadn't stepped into a broken marriage. She helped break it. And Richard? He discarded me like damage control. I wasn't the mistake. I was the evidence. I remember the night it all clicked. I opened the folder labeled insurance. 43 screenshots. 9 voice notes. 7 booking confirmations. 6 years of deceit. Power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like restraint. I could have sent it anonymously. Forwarded everything to him privately. Destroyed the illusion quietly. But I didn't. Because humiliation done in secret only protects the performer. And Richard loved an audience. That's what made the reunion different. That's what made the toast the final trigger. When he raised that glass. When he said mistake. When the family laughed. He wasn't defending himself. He was celebrating the rewrite. And that's when something inside me shifted. He made it a performance. So I decided to give him an audience. Back in the present under those string lights, I fully unlocked my phone. The screen glowed against my palm. The folder sat there. Waiting. I looked up at him, smiling, confident, untouchable. For now. My thumb hovered over the first screenshot. The room still buzzed with laughter. He thought the narrative was safe. He thought certainty was permanent. I raised my own glass slowly. Before we celebrate family, I said, and every head turned. Before we celebrate family. My voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. The shift in the air was immediate, like someone had opened a window no one asked for. Conversations stalled. Forks paused midair. Even the string lights seemed too bright all of a sudden. Richard lowered his glass slowly. "Emily," he said, smiling through his teeth. "Now's not the time." I held his gaze. "Actually," I replied calmly, "it's the perfect time." A few cousins exchanged glances. Megan looked confused, her hand still resting near her plate. Vanessa's posture stiffened, subtle, but I saw it. I lifted my phone. "I think before we define mistakes," I continued, "we should define honesty." Richard laughed. "Too quick. Too sharp. If this is about your childhood again." "It's not," I said. "It's about yours." The TV mounted near the patio had been looping old family photos all evening. Smiling vacations. Christmas mornings. Carefully curated history. I stepped toward it and tapped AirPlay. The first screenshot filled the screen. A hotel confirmation. 2 guests. Tuesday. The laughter died completely this time. Richard frowned. "What is this?" Vanessa's face drained of color so subtly most people wouldn't notice. But I did. I had memorized her expressions. "That," I said evenly, "is a reservation made during one of Dad's weekly golf nights." Murmurs began. I swiped. Another image. A selfie. Vanessa at a bar. A man's hand on her waist. Gasps. Richard blinked, confused more than angry. "This is fake." I didn't respond. Swipe. A message thread appeared. Her name at the top. Dates spanning years. "R is so predictable. Tuesday works." "He thinks I'm at Pilates." Vanessa finally found her voice. "This is insane. You can't just." I tapped the final screenshot. The one I had stared at 100 times. "She doesn't know. Or thinks she's mine. That's all that matters." Silence. Real silence. Not discomfort. Not whispering. Just absence of sound. Megan's face changed first. Confusion turning into something slower. Something heavier. Richard read the message once. Then again. He didn't understand at first. You could see his mind trying to reject it. Searching for an alternative explanation. "She," he muttered. "Who is she?" No one answered. Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came out. Megan looked at her mother. "Mom." Vanessa swallowed. "It's taken out of context." "Then explain it," I said quietly. Richard's voice rose. "This is fabricated. Photoshopped. You've always been dramatic." "Dad," I interrupted gently, "check the dates." He stepped closer to the screen. 6 years. 6 years of Tuesdays. The room began to feel smaller. Relatives shifted uncomfortably. Someone near the grill whispered, "Oh my God." Richard turned to Vanessa. "Tell them this isn't real." She hesitated. Just for a second. But that second was enough. Megan's voice cracked. "Mom." Vanessa finally spoke, but her confidence was gone. It didn't mean anything. That was the first admission. Not full, but fatal. Richard stepped back like he'd been physically pushed. "How long?" She didn't answer. "How long?" he repeated louder now. Megan stood frozen, eyes flicking between them. "You said he was my father." No one moved. The words didn't sound angry. They sounded broken. Richard looked at Megan like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as legacy. Not as proof. Just as possibility. And possibility terrified him. "I am your father," he insisted. But it sounded more like a question than a statement. I lowered my glass. "This isn't about revenge," I said quietly. "It's about truth." Richard rounded on me. "Why would you do this?" I met his eyes without flinching. "You called me the mistake." The wind moved softly through the yard. Plates sat untouched. Conversations had completely dissolved. Vanessa grabbed her purse first. "We're leaving," she said sharply, though no one was stopping her. Megan didn't follow immediately. She just stood there, stunned, her world rearranging itself in real time. Richard walked toward the house without another word. Not commanding. Not composed. Just smaller. The performance had ended. No applause. No curtain call. Just consequences. I set my glass down carefully on the table. I was never the mistake, I said, not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly. And for the first time in my life, no one laughed. The reunion ended without anyone officially ending it. No goodbye speeches. No dessert. Just chairs scraping against concrete and relatives leaving in careful clusters, whispering like witnesses exiting a courtroom. The family group chat exploded before I even reached my car. Aunt Linda. What just happened? Cousin Mark, is this real? Vanessa. Do not speculate. Richard didn't text. He called Megan 3 times. She didn't answer. By morning, the performance had fully collapsed. Richard demanded a DNA test. Not privately. Not calmly. He sent it in the group chat. I will not have my name dragged through the mud without proof. Proof. The word tasted familiar. Vanessa resisted at first. Said it was unnecessary. Said it would only make things worse. But silence had already done that. Within a week, the appointment was scheduled. And for the first time in his life, Richard had to wait for an answer he couldn't control. Waiting dismantled him. He stopped posting online. Skipped church that Sunday. Turned down a golf invite. When your identity is built on certainty, doubt feels like suffocation. 4 years, he had built his pride around 3 things. His reputation. His marriage. His only daughter. He used them like armor. Every time he diminished me, it reinforced that armor. Every time he called me from before, it elevated what came after. But now the foundation trembled. And everyone knew it. The results arrived 3 weeks later. Not in a dramatic envelope. Not in some cinematic reveal. Just an email. Megan forwarded it to both of them. Then strangely, to me. No caption. Just the attachment. Richard is not the biological father. No exclamation point. No commentary. Just fact. Silence followed. Not shouting. Not chaos. Just the kind of quiet that rearranges a life. Vanessa moved out 2 weeks later. No official statement. No apology tour. Just distance. Richard tried to spin it at first. Said biology doesn't define fatherhood. Said love matters more. But it was hard to preach that after 18 years of telling me blood was everything. He called me on a Tuesday. Of course it was a Tuesday. His voice sounded hollow. Why did you do this? Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry. Just that. I let the quiet sit between us for a moment. You did it, I said calmly. I just stopped protecting you. He exhaled slowly. You destroyed this family. No, I replied. You built it on something fragile. There was a long pause. For a second, just a second, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said, I loved her. I didn't know if he meant Vanessa, or Megan, or the idea of himself. Maybe all 3. I hope you still do, I said. And I meant it. Because none of this was about revenge anymore. It was about ending a lie. I didn't expect Megan to reach out. But she did. A simple text. Can we talk? We met at a small coffee shop 2 towns over. Neutral ground. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone had removed the walls of her house and told her the sky was permanent. I don't know who I am, she said quietly. I didn't rush to fill the silence. Because I understood that feeling too well. You're still you, I said finally. DNA doesn't erase that. She studied me carefully. Did you hate me? The question surprised me. No, I said honestly. I envied you. That's different. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. For what it's worth, she added softly. I never thought you were the mistake. That landed deeper than she probably realized. We didn't solve everything that day. But something shifted. Not rivalry. Not replacement. Just recognition. We had both been manipulated, just in opposite directions. Months later, there was another family gathering. Smaller. Quieter. Richard attended. Alone. I didn't. I wasn't avoiding him. I just didn't need the stage anymore. Sometimes closure isn't confrontation. It's absence. I stood in my apartment that evening, watching the sun sink behind buildings, and realized something simple. For years he called me the mistake. But the truth was, I was the only honest thing in his life. You can rewrite history. You can curate narratives. You can build identity on performance. But DNA doesn't care about your story. And eventually, neither do the people listening.